My name's Martin Shelley. I'm the head of secondary at Tembe International School here in Setia Eco Hill in Seminye. This session is basically just something I thought people might find useful if they've got children who are going through exams in the near future or at any time really. It's something that I've given to parents in the past and they've all found it quite useful, so I hope you do too. I have slides which I can send to you later. It's on a PowerPoint, but I thought because it's a Facebook Live, I can't really have a screen behind me. It's quite difficult to see, so I will just talk you through it. Okay? All right, exciting. Okay, so obviously all students take exams, whether they're at my school, at Tembe, Setia Eco Hill, or anywhere else. And obviously it's a very stressful time for them, but it's also a very stressful time for the family, the whole family. So it begs the question, what can you do as a parent to support your child? And I just thought I'd talk about some of these things today. So I've got 10 points I'm going to cover. As I said, if you have any questions, you can ask them on the chat, and I can make the slides available if you contact the school as well. So the first thing is, leading up to an exam period is, number one, make sure the students have a plan, that your students have a plan, your children. That means they should have a revision timetable, and the revision timetable doesn't stop when the exams start. So long before the exams begin, they should have established some sort of revision timetable, of course. But the important thing is that they continue that through the exam. So once one exam is done and dusted, then they still continue revising for the other exams. Okay, so that was number one, make sure they have a plan. It's a really good idea to talk to them about it. Some students will not have a plan. Some students will just try and muddle through as best they can, which is not really advisable. And sometimes all it takes is for you to discuss with them, what are you revising today? What's the plan? Can I have a look at your plan for this whole week? Have you separated your subjects out day by day, etc.? What I usually do with my students at school is I make them categorize their subjects in a rank order. So the subject they find the most difficult and the most challenging, that becomes number one. The subject that's second most difficult becomes number two, and so on and so forth. And so by ranking their subjects, then they can allocate time in their revision timetable to the subjects that need it the most. Like they might be super confident with English, so there's not a great deal of point in them studying for English a lot. So better that they study more for the subjects they find most difficult, etc. It's pretty obvious, just prioritizing. So point number one was ensure they have a plan. Now, number two is similar. It's to make sure that you have a plan as well as a parent, indeed your whole family. You must be sensitive to the stress that students are under when they're going through an exam period. So it makes sense for you to know exactly what their timetable looks like, their exam timetable. Obviously you need to get them there on time, that's a given, but also to make sure that you understand the certain days that are more stressful, like a day where they have two exams, for example, will be more taxing on them. So, get their exam timetable, stick it on the fridge. Make sure everybody knows what day they have exams, including, younger children, so they know what days not to bug their older brother and sister. Okay, now, point three is an interesting one. It's monitoring and study. Okay, now, you can't stand over your children while they're studying. It doesn't work at all. It doesn't help at all. Even if you are confident with that particular subject, when it gets to the point when they're about to sit their exams, you're not going to add a lot of value trying to help them study per se. They know what they need. They know what areas they need help on, and they should know how to revise properly. So yes, you need to monitor their study, but don't stand over them. Now, what I mean by monitor their study is make sure they're not doing too much, okay? There is such a thing as burnout. I've seen it before, where a student gets to the point where they just can't do it anymore. They just can't even pick up a book. They literally just burn out. And obviously you want to avoid that. And a good way to avoid that is to make sure that they don't spend too long in one particular session. One study session shouldn't last more than 45 minutes to 60 minutes maximum. After that, they need a break, go for a walk, watch a bit of TV, listen to some music, just chat with the family, eat some food, have a drink, whatever. As long as they're not studying for long periods of time, it is detrimental. It doesn't actually help. They need to have a break in between. A lot of studies have also shown that listening to music while you study can actually be beneficial as well. So that's something to think about. Okay, point 3, when your child's done an exam, have a chat to them about it. Let them sort of vent about how it went. But by no means should you sort of put pressure on them to break down the exam. Some students will not want to talk about their exam at all. Once they're finished, they just want to, that's it, end of story. And that's completely fine. There is no benefit to sort of quizzing them on how the exam went, because it's passed, it's gone, it's finished. There's no help at all. If anything, it could make them feel worse if something is raised and they realise they've done something wrong, etc., etc. So after an exam, just listen to their story and then move on. Just leave it be. Point number 5 is routines. Really important for an exam period, really important full stop, I guess. Make sure that they have a routine. So they get home from school and then they study between, 4 and 5, then they have a half an hour break, then they have dinner, then they do another study session, then another break, and then a final session. They shouldn't be studying past 9 o'clock at night. It's been well proven that late night study is not effective. Even though many of us did it during university, for high school students, the sleep is far more important than 45 minutes late at night cramming for an exam the next day. So you've really got to make sure they establish routines. That means getting to bed early, that means having a good night's sleep, that means eating at the same time every day, just going through the normal day-to-day routines. Number 6, I've sort of mentioned, is sleep. I can't express enough how important sleep is for students. And that goes from pretty much all ages. We live in an age now where kids are glued to their phones a lot of the time, tablets, etc. And it's increasingly dangerous. Like, the screen time is one thing. There can be damage to their eyes, etc. if they're on the screens too much. But when they're on their phones late at night, it's more difficult for them to fall asleep, and it's very easy for them to lose track of time. They can be on their phone at 10 o'clock and then suddenly it's 12:30 and they're still just on their phone. So I would suggest during an exam period that when they go to sleep, like when they go into the room to sleep, that you keep the phone in another room. I know that's traumatic for the children, but when they're going through an exam period, it's very stressful. There's a lot on their mind. The last thing they need is further input from social media and whatever they happen to be doing on their phones. So yeah, I really do think it's the best idea possible to keep their phone in a different room when they're sleeping. They go to sleep, not to spend hours playing on their phone. Because some of them will use that as an escape from the stress and the pressures of the exam. They'll just talk to their friends, chat, browse social media, etc. But much better, they go to sleep. All right, point number 7 is nutrition. Obviously, not a lot to say about this. They need to eat properly and they need to drink loads of water. Simple. It is simple and it is obvious, but it's something that can quite easily be forgotten. Just make sure when they come to school during exam periods, they've got a nice, healthy, nutritious lunch, or if they're buying lunch at school, that's great too. But just keep an eye on it. Make sure they're drinking enough water. Ask them, have you drinking enough water? Because I've seen it in exams, especially the longer ones, 2-3 hour exams, where students who aren't well hydrated start to get quite sleepy. They start to actually literally sort of shut down a bit, as it were, during the exam. So the hydration is really, really important as well. Point number 8 is support. It sounds pretty obvious, but what I mean by support is not just, saying, go on, you can do it, good job. It's thinking about the whole bigger family picture. If you've got a large family and you've got lots of small children, you do have to think of ways to support your child going through the exam in terms of giving them a quiet space where they can work, in terms of making sure that they're not getting bugged by younger siblings, all those sorts of things. It seems obvious, but I've spoken to loads of children who stress out during exam periods, and then they say when they get home they can't study, it's too busy, it's too noisy, etc., etc. So you've really got to try and make those allowances for students during exams. Number 9, I called it priorities. And as I've said before, I can make the PowerPoint that I'm speaking from available if you want it. Just contact the school, it's no problem. But number 9 is priorities. It's a big one. In different countries, there are different levels of priority or levels of pressure put on exams. And I have noticed that in Malaysia, there is a great deal of pressure put on students regarding exams. You've got to put this into context. IGCSE exams, they're very important, but they are not the end of the world. If a student goes on to A-level, they certainly have the chance, or IB, or pre-U, or foundation. They have the opportunity to improve, and then obviously they go into university, and it sort of resets again and starts again. I think we really need to make sure that we don't put too much pressure on them at this age. 15, 16 years old, IGCSE, it's important, but it's not the be-all and end-all. We want them to do well, of course. We want them to do very well, but I've seen it firsthand where students are under so much pressure that they can actually suffer from what we would call burnout, which is, like I mentioned earlier, they just can't handle it anymore. They just refuse to study. They just give up on the whole process. And that only comes through pressure, whether it's parental pressure, whether it's pressure from teachers, whether it's pressure from friends. It doesn't matter. But we've got to make sure that we put it into perspective. Exams are really important, but they're not the end of the world. If a student comes home and they've done badly, or they think they've done badly, then that's something you just deal with. It doesn't have to be something that you reinforce or, I don't know, make too big of a deal of. If they fail an exam, sometimes they think they failed and they haven't even failed. It's important just to reassure them, there's other opportunities. You can resit in November, you can resit next year. It's not the end of the world. But I can assure you, I have actually seen some students who suffered from burnout, and it wasn't pretty. One boy I taught in the UK, he couldn't actually even bring himself to sit his exams because he was so stressed out. He felt so pressured to do well in the exams. So some pressure is fine, of course, but within limits. Okay, and my last point of the 10, I'll run through what the 10 were quickly at the end for anybody who missed, is exercise. I'm sure you all know during the MCO, it was difficult. We're all stuck at home for long periods of time, and exercise was difficult to do. A lot of people found quite creative ways to do it. Exercising at home, just walking around the house, walking around the front yard, doing, exercises within the house, Zumba and yoga and that sort of thing. But during an exam period, it's super important that the children get some exercise. They have to get some cardio happening because they're spending a great deal of time sitting down stagnant. And that includes the exams themselves. They're sitting in an exam for 1, 2, 3 hours without moving. Then they come home and they sit down and they're studying, sitting still, not moving. The more their blood's pumping, the more active their brain becomes. It's simple. So they need to get exercising. I don't mean go for a 5-kilometre run. Just, a 20-minute walk is sufficient just to get them up, get the body pumping. Okay. All right, so that is my 10 points. I'll just go through them in case you missed any or came late. The first one was make sure your children have a plan, a study plan, like a revision timetable, etc. Point 2 was you need to have a plan too. Organise your household based around the fact that they are having exams and make allowances for that. Number 3 was monitor your child's study. It doesn't mean stand over them. It just means make sure that they're not studying too long. That would be the biggest issue. 45 minutes to 60 minutes is plenty for a single revision session. After an exam, listen to their story, but don't quiz them on it. If they don't want to open up about how an exam went, that's completely fine. The results will be proof of how the exam went, and any sort of discussion or conjecture about what happened in the exam is not really valuable or even useful at all, because at the end of the day, they might think an exam went badly, but it might have gone well. So at the end of the day, listen to their story, but just let them move on. Encourage them to move on. Try and tell them not to dwell on the exam. Routines, well-balanced routines. Just try and keep things the same as they normally are, and just keep them in a solid routine, like meal times at the same time, bedtime at the same time, etc., etc. And then, of course, sleep. Make sure they get plenty of sleep. Nutrition, nice healthy meals, plenty of fruit and vegetables, a good breakfast in the morning to keep them going, and snacks as required. And number 8 was support. Just, being aware of the stress that they're going through, supporting them, and organising the other members of your household, and that can even include pets, to make sure that the environment in the house is conducive to them studying. So find them a little place where they can study and it's quiet. It is good to give students a study area that's free from distractions. A bedroom is not always the best place to study. I found that if they have a little space somewhere in the house where there's not a tablet or a phone or whatever, obviously they might need those for the study, but a place that's got less distractions, just a calm little spot where they're sitting comfortably at a chair with a desk and they're free from distractions and they can just get on with their study. And number 9 was prioritizing. As I said, just don't put too much emphasis on the exams when it's not necessary. Exams are important, but they're not the end of the world. The last thing we want to do is stress our children out with pressure, them feeling like if they don't do well on these exams, they're going to be failures. And I've spoken to children who do feel like that. I've spoken to kids who have said, I think if I don't do well on these exams, my parents will think less of me, or my parents will be so angry with me. And it's never the case. I can assure you it's not the case, but the parents in some situations have mistakenly put too much pressure on the kids to make them think like that. But of course it wasn't the case. Of course their parents still love them. But yeah, just exams are important, but they're not the end of the world. And then the last one was exercise. Make sure the kids get loads of exercise. It doesn't have to be super, super intense. Like I said, short walks around the house, little yoga sessions, things like that, completely fine. But just to get them up off their butts and being active. Okay, and so that is my 10 tips on exams. I hope you have enjoyed listening to me. It's been a pleasure from my point of view. And if you want to get the slides that I've been speaking from, then they're available. Just contact the school and someone can send them to you directly. Okay, take care everybody. Have a good day and a lovely weekend. Bye-bye.